For 20 years, Linnea Berg believed she had been abandoned. She believed nobody remembered her, nobody cared, nobody was coming back. Then, a stranger left her an abandoned schoolhouse hidden in the Smoland Hills. Inside, she found an old register containing the names of forgotten children, and on one yellowed page, she found her own. What happened next would force her to question everything she believed about her parents, uncover a promise kept for 20 years, and reveal a truth that changed not only her life, but hundreds of others. Stay with me, because some stories don't begin when a secret is discovered. They begin when the truth finally comes home. The autumn wind swept across the Smoland Hills, carrying fallen leaves along the empty roadside. Linnea Berg stood alone beside an old bus stop with a worn suitcase resting at her feet. The suitcase had followed her for most of her life, not because she loved to travel, but because she never stayed anywhere long enough to unpack. At 24 years old, Linnea had lived in 7 foster homes, 7 different bedrooms, 7 different families, 7 different goodbyes. She entered the system when she was 4 years old after losing her parents. The records were brief, the explanations even shorter. Over time, she stopped asking questions. Nobody ever seemed to have answers. At first, she unpacked every time she moved. She hung drawings on walls, arranged books on shelves, folded clothes into dressers. But after enough departures, she learned something painful. Hope made leaving harder. So, eventually, the suitcase stayed packed, ready for the next goodbye. When Linnea was 11, she spent Christmas Eve sitting quietly on a staircase while her foster family opened presents downstairs. She could hear laughter, wrapping paper tearing, children shouting with excitement. Hours later, after everyone had gone to bed, she walked into the living room. Nothing under the tree had her name on it. Not a single gift, not even a card. She never forgot that night. Not because of the presents, but because it was the first time she wondered if she truly belonged anywhere at all. Years later, on her 18th birthday, she aged out of foster care. No family came, no farewell party, no one waiting. That evening, she bought herself a small vanilla cupcake from a grocery store bakery. She placed a candle in the frosting and sat alone in her car. No one sang, no one remembered. She made a wish anyway, then blew out the candle herself. For years afterward, Linnea carried the same question wherever she went. If my parents loved me, why did nobody ever come back? The answer arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning in a plain white envelope. Inside was a letter from an attorney. A man named Bengt Holmgren had recently passed away. According to his will, he had left a property to Linnea. She read the letter 3 times. The name meant nothing to her. She had never met Bengt Holmgren. As far as she knew, she had no family left. Confused, she reached deeper into the envelope. A brass key slipped into her hand. Old, heavy, worn smooth by time. Attached to it was a folded note. The handwriting trembled slightly, like it had been written by someone in the final chapter of their life. Linnea unfolded the paper. Only 6 words appeared on the page. It's time you learned the truth. Her heart skipped. For a long moment, she simply stared, because somewhere beyond the Smoland Hills stood an abandoned one-room schoolhouse that had been empty for more than 40 years. Inside that schoolhouse was a forgotten register. Inside that register were hundreds of names. Names of children the world had left behind, and one of those names was Linnea Berg. 3 days later, Linnea found herself driving down a narrow country road she had never seen before. The Smoland Hills rolled endlessly around her, painted in shades of gold and amber beneath the late autumn sun. The farther she drove, the quieter the world became. No petrol stations, no houses, no traffic, just winding roads and old trees that seemed to have been standing there forever. The address from the attorney eventually led her to a rusted iron gate hanging crooked on broken hinges. Beyond it stood a small one-room schoolhouse. For a moment, Linnea simply sat behind the steering wheel. The building looked older than she had imagined. Red paint peeled from weathered wooden walls. Several windows were cracked. The bell tower leaned slightly to one side, as if time itself had grown tired of holding it upright. And yet something about the place felt strangely familiar. Familiar in memory, familiar in feeling, like a dream she'd forgotten years ago. She grabbed the brass key from her pocket and stepped out of the car. The wind moved softly through the tall grass surrounding the schoolhouse. The building stood completely silent, waiting. The front door was secured by an old iron lock. Linnea hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the key. For 20 years, she had searched for answers. Now, she wasn't entirely sure she wanted them because answers had a way of changing things, sometimes forever. Still, she slid the key into the lock. The mechanism resisted at first, then came a heavy click. The sound echoed through the quiet afternoon. The door slowly swung inward. A wave of cool air drifted out. Dust, old wood, paper, the scent of forgotten years. Linnea stepped inside. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, illuminating thousands of dust particles floating through the air like tiny ghosts. Rows of wooden desks still filled the room. A blackboard stretched across the front wall. Faded chalk marks remained visible even after decades. Someone had written a date in the corner. The 14th of September, 1982, the final day classes had been held there. It felt as though the students had simply stood up and left and never returned. Linnea slowly walked between the desks. Her footsteps echoed softly across the floorboards. She ran her fingers across one of the desktops. Tiny initials had been carved into the wood. Names, memories, children who had once sat exactly where she stood now, children who had laughed, learned, dreamed. For reasons she couldn't explain, a strange sadness settled over her. The schoolhouse didn't feel abandoned. It felt forgotten. And somehow, Linnea understood that feeling better than most. At the front of the room stood an old teacher's desk. Unlike everything else, it was completely clean. No dust, no cobwebs, nothing. As if someone had been caring for it long after the school closed, a chill moved through her. Slowly, she approached. On top of the desk sat a framed photograph. The image showed a man in his 70s standing beside a group of smiling children. The same man from the attorney's letter thanked Holmgren. For the first time, Linnea looked into the eyes of the stranger who had changed her life. There was something gentle about his face. Kind, patient, the kind of face people trusted. Beside the photograph sat a small envelope. Her breath caught. Written across the front were 2 words. For Linnea. The handwriting matched the note attached to the brass key. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message was short. If you're reading this, then I've run out of time. There are things you deserve to know. Things that should have been told to you long ago. The answers you're looking for are here, but you must be willing to find them. Start where all stories begin. The children. Linnea read the note twice, then a third time. The children. She looked around the room. Rows of empty desks stared back at her. Then her eyes drifted toward the rear corner of the classroom. A tall wooden filing cabinet stood against the wall. Unlike the desks, it was locked. Her heart began to beat faster. Without thinking, she reached for the brass key. The key fit perfectly. Another click, another secret opening after decades of silence. The top drawer slid open. Inside were hundreds of carefully organized student records. Names, birth dates, attendance reports, photographs, decades of forgotten lives. Linnea slowly flipped through them. One folder, then another, then another. Hours seemed to disappear. The afternoon sunlight gradually softened into evening. And then she noticed something unusual. At the very back of the cabinet sat a drawer hidden behind a false wooden panel. It almost blended into the cabinet itself. Almost. Her pulse quickened. Carefully, she pressed against the panel. It shifted. Behind it was a smaller compartment, and inside rested a large, leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked with age. Its corners worn smooth, no title. No markings, just old brown leather darkened by time. Linnea lifted it carefully. It was heavier than she expected, as though it carried far more than paper, as though it carried lives. A folded note rested on top. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Only one sentence appeared. The same handwriting, the same careful strokes, the same mystery. Some children are forgotten by the world. Others are hidden to protect them. Before you judge what happened to you, read this. A knot formed in Linnea's throat. Slowly, she opened the book. The first page revealed a handwritten title, The Orphan Register. Below it were hundreds of names, hundreds of stories, hundreds of children. For a long moment, Linnea could only stare. Then she turned page after page. The room grew darker around her. The sun disappeared behind the hills. Still, she kept reading. And then suddenly, she froze. Her breath stopped. Because halfway down one yellowed page, written in fading black ink, was a name she knew better than any other. Linnea Berg, age 4. Status: must be protected at all costs. And for the first time in her life, Linnea realized that someone, somewhere, had been protecting her all along. For a long moment, Linnea couldn't move. The old schoolhouse seemed to disappear around her. The fading light, the creaking floorboards, the wind rushing against the windows. Everything faded into the background. All she could see were those 4 words: must be protected at all costs. Her name sat there on the page as if it had been waiting for her, waiting for 20 years. Waiting through every foster home, every lonely birthday, every unanswered question, Linnea slowly lowered herself into one of the old wooden chairs. The register remained open in her lap. Her fingers traced the faded ink beside her name. Age 4. The same age she had been when her life shattered, the same age she had entered foster care, the same age her memories ended. Her chest tightened. Who wrote this? Why was she here? And who had decided she needed protection? The room felt suddenly smaller, the silence heavier. She turned the page, then another, then another. Hundreds of names filled the register. Some entries contained only basic information. Others included handwritten notes, placed with relatives, transferred safely, family located. Identity changed. Linnea frowned. Identity changed. She read the words again. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't an ordinary school record. This was something else entirely. Something hidden. Something important. A sudden sound startled her. Knock, knock, knock. The sharp rapping echoed through the empty building. Linnea jumped so hard the register nearly slipped from her hands. Her heart began pounding. No one knew she was here. At least she didn't think anyone did. The knock came again. Slower this time. Patient. Almost gentle, Linnea stood and carefully closed the register. The fading evening light cast long shadows across the classroom as she walked toward the front door. Her pulse quickened with every step. When she finally opened it, an elderly woman stood on the porch. She looked to be in her early 80s. Silver hair framed a weathered face lined by decades of laughter and loss. A knitted blue cardigan hung loosely over her shoulders. Her hands rested on a wooden cane, polished smooth with use. For several seconds between Linnea and Clara Wallen, neither woman spoke. The older woman's eyes fixed on Linnea and suddenly filled with tears. Not surprise, recognition. As though she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. The cane trembled slightly in her hand. "It really is you." Linnea blinked. "I'm sorry." The woman smiled through tears. "You have your mother's eyes." The words hit Linnea like a physical force. Her mother's eyes. No one had ever said that before. No one. The woman gently pressed a hand against her chest. "My name is Clara Wallen." Her voice cracked. "I've been waiting 20 years to meet you." The world seemed to stop. 20 years? Linnea stared at her. "You know who I am?" Clara let out a shaky breath. "Oh, sweetheart." The affection in her voice felt strangely unfamiliar, painfully unfamiliar. The way a grandmother might speak, the way family might speak. "I knew who you were the moment I saw you." Linnea swallowed hard. "But how?" Clara glanced toward the schoolhouse behind her, toward the old classroom, toward the register, then back at Linnea. "Because Bengt never stopped talking about you." Linnea froze. Bengt Holmgren, the stranger whose name had appeared in the attorney's letter. The stranger who had left her the schoolhouse. The stranger who suddenly didn't feel like a stranger anymore. The two women sat together inside the classroom as darkness slowly settled outside. Clara spoke quietly as if telling a story she had carried for too many years. Bengt was the headmaster here before the school closed. Her eyes wandered across the room. He loved these children. She smiled softly. Every one of them. Linnea listened. Something inside her told her not to interrupt. After the school shut down, he stayed. Clara continued. Most people left. Bengt didn't. She looked down at her hands. Because he made a promise. Linnea's stomach tightened. What promise? Linnea whispered. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she looked directly at her. A promise to your parents. The room suddenly felt colder. Linnea could hear her own heartbeat. Clara reached into her handbag and removed a small bundle of envelopes tied together with faded ribbon. She placed them carefully on the desk. Linnea stared. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Every envelope had a date written across the front. Years of dates, years of handwriting, years of memories. What are those? Linnea whispered. Clara's eyes glistened. Your life. Linnea frowned. My life? Clara nodded. Every birthday. She pointed to one envelope. Every graduation. Another. Every time you moved to a new foster home. Another. Every milestone Banked could learn about. Linnea felt the blood drain from her face. What are you talking about? Clara smiled sadly. He followed your life. The words barely sounded real. He what? He watched over you. Clara's voice softened. Not in a harmful way, not like that. He simply wanted to know you were safe. Linnea couldn't speak. For years, she had believed no one cared. No one remembered. No one even knew where she was. Yet this man, this stranger, had spent 2 decades quietly keeping track of her life. Clara gently untied the ribbon around the envelopes. She selected one from the middle of the stack. The date read October 12th, Linnea's 18th birthday. The year she aged out of foster care. Clara handed it to her. Slowly, Linnea opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting matched the note she had found earlier. Banked's handwriting. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Today, Linnea turned 18. No one showed up for her. I wish I could have. I hope one day she understands she was never forgotten. Linnea stopped reading. Her vision completely blurred. The classroom disappeared behind tears. For 20 years, she had carried the same belief that she was alone, that nobody came, that nobody stayed. But somewhere in the background of her life, a promise had survived. Through every night, every goodbye, every lonely year. And for the first time since arriving at the schoolhouse, Linnea began to realize something impossible. Maybe the story she had told herself her entire life wasn't true. Maybe she had never been abandoned at all. And maybe the greatest secret inside the orphan register wasn't hidden among hundreds of names. Maybe it was hidden inside her own. That night, Linnea barely slept. The old schoolhouse sat beneath a blanket of stars, quiet except for the occasional whisper of wind against the windows. Bank's letters remained spread across the teacher's desk, dozens of them. Years of observations, years of concern, years of caring from a distance. Linnea had read nearly every one. Some made her smile, others made her cry, but one thought refused to leave her alone. If Bank cared so much, why had he never come for her? Why had nobody come for her? The question followed her through the darkness. By sunrise, it was all she could think about. The next morning, Clara arrived carrying coffee and a small basket of homemade cardamom buns. The elderly woman immediately noticed the exhaustion in Linnea's face. You didn't sleep. Linnea gave a humorless laugh. Not much. Clara nodded as if she had expected that answer. For a while, they sat in silence inside the old classroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust that floated lazily through the air. Finally, Linnea looked up. Why didn't he tell me? Clara didn't pretend to misunderstand. Banked. Linnea nodded. If he knew where I was, her voice tightened. If he cared, she struggled to finish. Why didn't he come? The old woman lowered her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she quietly stood and walked toward one of the filing cabinets. From the bottom drawer, she removed a thin brown folder unlike the others. This one was tied shut with faded blue ribbon. Clara carried it carefully back to the desk. Her hands trembled slightly. I hoped this day would never come. Linnea frowned. What is it? Clara's eyes softened. The hardest part of the story. A knot formed in Linnea's stomach. Slowly, Clara pushed the folder toward her. Your parents. The room seemed to grow still. Linnea stared at the ribbon. For 20 years, she had imagined this moment. 20 years of questions, 20 years of wondering, 20 years of pain, and somehow, now that the answers were within reach, she was terrified. With shaking fingers, she untied the ribbon. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, and one sealed envelope. Across the front, written in careful handwriting, were 3 simple words. For Linnea, someday. Her breath caught. She recognized neither the handwriting nor the paper, but something inside her knew. This was from them, her parents. Slowly, she opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed with age. The first sentence hit her like a punch. If you're reading this, then we were unable to come back for you. Tears immediately blurred her vision. She swallowed hard and continued. Before you judge us, there is something you need to understand. The words that followed shattered her. Years ago, her parents had been working with investigators to expose a child trafficking operation that targeted vulnerable children across several counties. Runaways, foster children, orphans, children nobody would immediately notice missing. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. Threats followed, warnings, surveillance, people watching, people asking questions. Eventually, they realized something terrifying. Their daughter could become a target. Linnea's hands trembled. She kept reading. Then she reached the sentence that stopped her cold. We ask that our identities be removed from your records. Her heart dropped. She read it again. Surely she had misunderstood. But the words remained. We requested that nobody tell you who we were. The room began to spin. A rush of anger surged through her chest. What? The word escaped before she could stop it. Clara looked up. Linnea stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. No. Her voice cracked. No. She stared at the letter, at the signatures, at the proof. They did this. Tears streamed down her face. They chose this. For 20 years, she had imagined every possible explanation. A tragic accident, a government mistake, lost records, bad luck. But not this. Never this. The possibility that her parents themselves had asked to disappear, that they had willingly erased themselves from her life. The pain hit harder than anything she had ever felt. Harder than the foster homes. Harder than the loneliness. Harder than Christmas on the staircase. Harder than blowing out that birthday candle alone. They abandoned me. Clara immediately shook her head. No, they left me. No, Linnea. They chose not to tell me. The tears wouldn't stop. For years, she had secretly defended them, believed there had to be a reason. Now, it felt as though that belief had been ripped away. She threw the letter onto the desk, then turned away, unable to look at it, unable to breathe, unable to think. For several moments, only silence filled the room. Then, Clara quietly reached for another envelope hidden beneath the first. Smaller, older, unopened. Read this one. Linnea didn't move. Please. The old woman's voice broke. Read this one before you decide. Slowly, reluctantly, Linnea took the second envelope. Inside was another letter. This one shorter. Written only days before her parents died. The first line made her freeze. If our daughter grows up hating us, then our plan worked. Linnea stared, confused, heartbroken, unable to understand. Then she kept reading. Hatred can heal, grief can heal, but dead children cannot. A tear landed on the page. Then another. If the people watching us believe Linnea is no longer connected to us, they will stop looking for her. If she believes we abandoned her, she will never come searching, and she will live. The room disappeared around her. Everything suddenly made sense. The missing records, the secrecy, banked silence, the years of distance. Her parents hadn't erased themselves because they didn't love her. They had erased themselves because they did. The realization hit like a wave. For 2 decades, Linnea had carried a wound. A single belief. Nobody wanted me, nobody came back. Nobody loved me enough to stay. And now that belief was collapsing. Painfully, completely. Across the desk, Clara wiped tears from her eyes. Your parents gave up the chance to be remembered. Her voice trembled. So you could have the chance to grow up. Linnea looked down at the letters in her hands. For the first time in 20 years, she saw her story differently. Not as the story of a child abandoned, but the story of 2 parents who sacrificed everything, even their own memory, to protect their daughter. And for the first time since she was 4 years old, Linnea wasn't asking why they left. She was asking something far more difficult. What kind of love is willing to be hated if it means your child survives? For a long time after Clara left, Linnea sat alone in the schoolhouse. The letters remained spread across Benk's desk. The afternoon sun slowly moved across the floorboards, stretching long shadows through the empty classroom. But Linnea barely noticed. Her parents' final words echoed through her mind. If our daughter grows up hating us, then our plan worked. She had spent 20 years believing she was unwanted, 20 years carrying a wound that wasn't real. And somehow, that realization hurt almost as much as the wound itself. Because if they hadn't abandoned her, then everything she thought she knew about her life was wrong. Linnea picked up the second letter again. This time, she read it more slowly and carefully, line by line, looking beyond the pain, looking for understanding. Near the bottom of the page, a sentence caught her attention. A sentence she hadn't fully noticed before. Banked knows where the records are. Records, not record, plural. Linnea frowned. Her eyes moved to the next sentence. If Linnea ever returns, she'll need to see everything. A chill moved through her. Everything. She looked around the classroom. The register sat on the desk. The filing cabinets lined the walls. The photographs. The folders. For days, she had assumed the orphan register was the secret. Now, she wasn't so sure. What if it was only the beginning? As evening approached, Linnea began searching. Every drawer. Every cabinet. Every shelf. She worked methodically, just as Bengt would have. Hours passed, dust covered her hands, the schoolhouse gradually darkened around her. Then she found it. Hidden beneath the false bottom of a cabinet drawer, a small metal lockbox. Its surface was scratched and worn. A label had been taped to the lid decades ago. The ink had faded, but one word remained visible. Restricted. Her heartbeat quickened. Slowly, she opened it. Inside were dozens of folders, each carefully organized, each marked with dates and names. At first, the contents seemed ordinary. Property records, court filings, adoption paperwork. But the deeper she looked, the stranger things became. Several files contained evidence that official records had been altered. Birth certificates changed, custody documents modified, names removed, names replaced. Linnea's pulse began to race. This wasn't just documentation, this was proof. Proof that children had been deliberately hidden, protected, moved beyond the reach of dangerous people. Then she found another folder, and another, and another. The same pattern repeated. Families fleeing abuse, children escaping exploitation, guardians disappearing from official records. Everything connected. Everything led back to the same period, the years before her parents died. A knot formed in Linnea's stomach. The trafficking operation mentioned in her parents' letter had been far larger than she imagined. Far larger. Bengt hadn't merely protected one child, he had helped protect dozens, maybe hundreds. The realization left her speechless. For decades, this forgotten schoolhouse had quietly guarded the identities of vulnerable children. Not because anyone wanted to rewrite history, but because history itself had become dangerous. Outside, darkness settled over the hills. Inside, Linnea continued reading. Near midnight, she opened one final folder. Unlike the others, it contained a photograph. A group picture, several adults standing outside the schoolhouse. Bengt was there, younger, healthier. Beside him stood a woman Linnea recognized from old photographs, her mother. For a moment, she simply stared. Seeing her standing there felt strangely surreal, like looking through a doorway into another life. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "The Promise Keepers, 1998. Linnea frowned. Beneath the photograph sat a handwritten journal. Its first page explained everything. The schoolhouse had secretly served as a coordination point for volunteers who helped vulnerable children and families escape dangerous situations. Teachers, social workers, church leaders, ordinary people. People who believed some lives were worth risking everything for. People like her parents. People like Bengt. Linnea turned page after page. The stories blurred together. Acts of courage, acts of sacrifice. People helping strangers because nobody else would. Some of them received threats, some lost jobs, some were forced to move. Yet they kept going. One journal entry made Linnea stop. It had been written by Bengt shortly after her parents' deaths. "Today, I promised them I would protect their daughter. I don't know how long that promise will last, but I know I cannot break it." Linnea lowered the journal. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she understood what Bengt had truly left behind. Not a building, not a collection of files, not even a register. A mission. That was the real inheritance. The schoolhouse had never been about preserving old records. It had always been about people. The forgotten, the displaced, the children who grew up asking the same questions she once asked. Who am I? Where do I belong? Did anyone ever care? Bengt had spent decades trying to answer those questions for others. Now, the responsibility rested with her. The realization should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in her life, Linnea wasn't searching for a family. She had found one. Not through blood, not through shared names, but through purpose. The next morning, she drove into town and met Clara for breakfast. The elderly woman immediately noticed something different, something lighter. "What happened?" Clara asked. Linnea smiled. A genuine smile, one Clara had never seen before. "I finally understand." Clara tilted her head. "Understand what?" Linnea looked toward the distant hills where the schoolhouse stood. Then she answered, "Why, Bengt left it to me." For years, she had believed she was the child who needed saving. But Bengt had seen something else. Someone who understood loss. Someone who understood loneliness. Someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be forgotten. And because of that, someone capable of helping others remember who they were. The schoolhouse wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. And for the first time since arriving in Smoland, Linnea knew exactly what came next. She was going to continue the work. She was going to find the missing names, reconnect the lost families, protect the stories that others wanted erased. Because some inherit money, some inherit property, and a very rare few inherit a purpose. Bengt Holmgren had spent his life protecting that purpose. Now it belonged to Linnea. The first few weeks were the busiest Linnea could remember. Every morning, she unlocked the doors of the old schoolhouse before sunrise. Every evening, she stayed long after dark. The work seemed endless. But for the first time in her life, exhaustion felt different. It carried purpose. The local newspaper's story about the orphan register spread farther than anyone expected. Soon, letters began arriving from neighboring counties, then neighboring regions, then from across the country. Some came from former foster children, others from grandchildren searching for family histories. Many simply contained questions that had waited decades for answers. And one by one, Linnea tried to answer them. By spring, she had already helped reconnect several families. Each reunion reminded her why Bengt had protected the records for so many years. One afternoon, an elderly woman named Margareta arrived at the schoolhouse carrying an old photograph. The edges were worn, the image faded, but the hope in her eyes remained strong. She had spent 58 years searching for a younger brother who disappeared after entering foster care. Everyone told her he was probably gone. Everyone told her to move on. She never did. 3 months later, Linnea found him living in Kiruna, 73 years old, still carrying the same childhood photograph, still searching. The reunion happened through a video call first. Neither sibling could speak for nearly a minute. They simply stared at each other. 2 lifetimes of questions hanging silently between them. When words finally came, they came through tears. Linnea sat quietly off camera, crying right along with them. Moments like that became the fuel that kept her moving. But not every discovery brought joy. Some records revealed painful truths. Families destroyed by addiction, children lost to neglect, lives permanently altered by decisions made long ago. The deeper Linnea dug, the more she realized something troubling. Certain names appeared repeatedly throughout the files. Judges, business owners, local officials, people with influence, people connected to cases that had never been fully investigated. At first, she assumed it was coincidence. Then she found Bengt's private notes, and the coincidence disappeared. One evening, while reviewing a stack of folders hidden inside the lockbox, Linnea discovered a collection of handwritten observations Bengt had never shared publicly. The notes were meticulous. Dates, names, conversations, patterns, questions, and one sentence appeared again and again. Someone knew. Linnea frowned. She kept reading. Over the years, Bengt had quietly documented irregularities surrounding certain child welfare cases. Missing paperwork, altered records, children transferred without explanation, investigations suddenly closed. The same powerful families appeared repeatedly in the margins. Not enough proof for criminal charges, but enough to raise disturbing questions. Enough to make Bengt nervous, enough to make him hide the records. A chill ran through Linnea. For the first time, she understood why her parents had been so afraid, and why Bengt had spent decades protecting those files. The next warning arrived 2 days later. This time, it wasn't a letter. When Linnea arrived at the schoolhouse one morning, the front door was standing open. Her stomach immediately tightened. She was certain she had locked it the night before. Slowly, she stepped inside. Nothing appeared broken, nothing appeared stolen. At first, then she noticed Bank's desk. Several folders had been moved, drawers left partially open. Someone had been searching. Her pulse quickened. She checked the filing cabinets. Most remained untouched, but one folder was missing. Only one. The folder containing several of Bank's notes about altered child welfare records. Linnea stood perfectly still. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where to find it. For a long moment, fear settled over her. Real fear. Not the kind she felt as a child, not loneliness, not uncertainty. This was different. Someone had entered the schoolhouse. Someone wanted information buried, and now they knew she possessed it. That evening, Clara listened quietly as Linnea explained what happened. The old woman's expression grew darker with every word. Finally, she sighed. "I was afraid of this." Lydia looked up. "You knew something like this could happen." Clara nodded slowly. Bank did too. The answer wasn't comforting. If anything, it made things worse. Why didn't he go to the police? Clara hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because sometimes knowing something is wrong and proving it are two very different things." The room fell silent. Linnea understood. Bank had spent years collecting fragments of truth, but fragments weren't always enough. Still, the break-in changed something inside her. That night, she sat alone in the schoolhouse long after Clara left. The old register rested open before her, page after page of names. Children who had trusted strangers. Children who had depended on adults to protect them. Children like her. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The same wind that had blown across these hills when Bank made his promise. The same wind that had carried her here. For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. She could walk away, sell the property, lock the records away, return to her old life. No more threats. No more questions. No more danger. It would be easier. Much easier. Then her eyes fell on people she barely knew. People who asked for nothing in return. If they had been willing to risk everything for children they loved, how could she do less? Slowly, Linnea closed the register. The doubt disappeared. Fear remained. But courage, she realized, wasn't the absence of fear. It was deciding something mattered more. The next morning, she contacted historians, archivists, and legal experts. If someone wanted these stories hidden, she would do the opposite. She would preserve them, digitize them, protect them, make sure they could never disappear again. Because the schoolhouse had become more than a building, more than a mystery, more than an inheritance. It had become a promise. And Linnea Berg intended to keep it. The first time Linnea unlocked the schoolhouse after the restoration was complete, she stood in the doorway for a long moment and simply looked around. Sunlight poured through newly repaired windows. The old wooden floors gleamed once again, fresh paint-covered walls that had spent decades fading beneath dust and time. For a moment, she could almost hear the echoes of children, laughter, footsteps, voices, hope. A year earlier, she had arrived carrying a single suitcase and a heart full of questions. Now, she stood inside something far greater than she ever imagined. Not a building, not an archive, a promise fulfilled. Word of the project had spread far beyond Smoland. Historians had become involved, genealogists volunteered their time, former foster children traveled from across the country hoping to find answers hidden within the records. Most important of all, the stories were safe. Every document had been digitized, every photograph preserved, every name protected. No one could make them disappear again. Bengt would have liked that. Linnea smiled at the thought. There were still difficult days. Not every family found the answers they were seeking. Not every reunion had a happy ending. Some wounds were simply too old. Some people were gone forever. But even then, there was comfort in knowing the truth. After all, uncertainty can last a lifetime. Truth, even painful truth, allows a person to finally rest. The official opening ceremony was scheduled for late September, nearly 1 year after Linnea first arrived at the forgotten schoolhouse. The weather forecast predicted rain. Instead, the morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of day that feels like a gift. Cars filled the gravel parking lot before sunrise. Families came carrying photographs, old letters, boxes of memories. Some traveled hundreds of kilometers, others came from neighboring towns. Many had never met one another. Yet, they all shared something in common. At some point in their lives, they had lost someone. And this place had helped them find their way back. By noon, every seat inside the schoolhouse was occupied. People stood along the walls, others gathered outside beneath the trees. Linnea remained near the back of the room, feeling overwhelmed. She never expected any of this. A year ago, she had been working double shifts at a local cafe. Now, she was standing inside a room filled with lives changed by a promise made decades earlier. Clara slowly approached, leaning on her cane. The elderly woman's eyes sparkled. Bengt would never believe this. Linnea laughed softly. I think he would. Clara smiled. You're probably right. The ceremony began shortly afterward. Several people spoke. A local historian, a family that had recently reunited after nearly 50 years apart, a retired social worker who once knew Bengt, each story carried the same theme. Someone remembered, someone cared. Someone refused to let another human being disappear. Eventually, Linnea was asked to speak. The room grew quiet as she stepped forward. Hundreds of eyes watched her. For a moment, she wasn't sure what to say. Then she looked toward Bengt's old desk, still standing exactly where it always had, and the words came naturally. When I arrived here, I thought I was looking for answers about my past. The room remained silent. I thought the story was about a little girl who had been abandoned. Linnea paused. Emotion tightened her voice. But I was wrong. Several people nodded. They understood. It wasn't a story about being abandoned. She smiled through gathering tears. It was a story about being loved in ways I couldn't see. Across the room, Clara quietly wiped her eyes. Linnea continued. My parents sacrificed everything to keep me safe. Bengt spent 20 years keeping a promise. And every person whose name appears in the orphan register reminds us of something important. She looked around the room. No one should be forgotten. The applause began immediately. Soft at first, then louder still. Many people stood. Some cried openly, others simply smiled. For a few seconds, Linnea could barely continue. The moment felt bigger than her, bigger than Bengt, bigger than the schoolhouse itself. It belonged to everyone whose story had finally been heard. After the ceremony ended, people wandered through the exhibits and archives, families reunited, old friends embraced. Children listened to stories from grandparents they had never fully known before. The schoolhouse was alive. More alive than it had been in decades. Late that afternoon, as the crowd began to thin, a volunteer approached Linnea. There's someone here asking for you. She turned. Near the entrance stood an elderly man. He appeared to be in his late 80s. His posture was bent with age, but his eyes were bright and alert. For a moment, Linnea didn't recognize him. Then she remembered. His name was Tomas Gustafsson, one of the first children listed in the orphan register. A man she had helped reconnect with distant relatives several months earlier. Tomas smiled warmly. I brought something. Carefully, he removed a small photograph from his coat pocket. The edges were worn from years of handling. I think this belongs to you. Linnea accepted it gently. The moment she looked at the image, her breath caught. A young man and woman stood together beneath a large oak tree, smiling, laughing, alive. Her parents? For several seconds, she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Tomas pointed toward the back. With trembling hands, Linnea turned the photograph over. Written in faded blue ink were words that had waited more than 20 years to reach her. If Linnea ever sees this, tell her she was never abandoned. Tell her she was loved every single day. Tell her we would have come back if we could. Tears spilled freely down Linnea's cheeks. All around her, the noise of the room seemed to disappear. The years of loneliness, the unanswered questions, the hurt she had carried since childhood for the first time, it all felt lighter. Not gone, but healed. Tomas gently placed a hand on her shoulder. They never stopped loving you. Linnea nodded, unable to speak, because finally she believed it. As the sun began to set over the Smoland hills, Linnea stepped outside onto the porch. Families lingered on the grounds below. Children ran across the grass. Laughter drifted through the evening air. The old bell tower cast a long shadow across the field. And for the first time since she was 4 years old, Linnea Berg no longer felt like a girl searching for where she belonged. She had found it. Not in a document, not in a photograph, not even in the truth about her parents. She found it in the lives she helped reconnect, in the stories she helped preserve, in the promise she chose to continue. The forgotten schoolhouse had once been a place where lost children were protected. Now it had become something even greater, a place where people came home, and somehow, after all those years, so had she. For 20 years, Linnea Berg believed she had been abandoned. She believed nobody remembered her, nobody cared, nobody was coming back. She was wrong. The people who loved her most had sacrificed everything to keep her safe, even their own chance to be remembered. And perhaps that's the lesson hidden inside this story. Not every silence means you weren't loved. Not every goodbye means you were forgotten. Sometimes the people who care about us make sacrifices we cannot understand until years later. 20 years ago, Linnea sat alone in a parking lot with a 50 kroner cupcake and a single candle. No family. No celebration, no one singing happy birthday. She believed she was alone. But while Linnea was growing up, someone was keeping a promise. And years later, the little girl who thought nobody remembered her became the reason hundreds of forgotten people were remembered. The child who spent her life searching for a family became the person who helped reunite families. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not finding all the answers, but discovering that our pain can become someone else's hope. And if Linnea's story teaches us anything, it's this. The little girl who believed nobody remembered her became the reason hundreds of people were remembered. And sometimes the very thing that breaks your heart becomes the thing that helps heal someone else's.